everyone. Welcome to the Princeton Review Live, Finding Your Best Fit College. I'm Julia Moody, college counselor at the Princeton Review, and I'll be presenting today's presentation along with Emily Belbel in our background. She'll be answering your questions throughout the presentation and may save some real key questions for the end of the event. So without further ado, we will get started. I'm going to give you a little intro in terms of my background. I have been a college counselor at the Princeton Review for a number of years, a college counselor in general for over 15 years in both public and private schools in Los Angeles primarily. I worked in admissions at MIT, which was a fantastic job. And I also work as a pro bono financial aid counselor when families need help and can't afford to hire a for-fee aid counselor. My educational background, bachelor's degree from Cornell, undergrad in frigid Ithaca, New York. Got my certificate in college counseling at UCLA. And then I went back to school later in life and got my master's degree in higher education at Harvard, the Harvard University Graduate School of Education. So that was an incredible time, the hardest thing I've ever done, but well worth it. And why college counseling? First of all, I love teenagers. I love getting to know families. And I think college is an awesome adventure, and I feel so honored to be able to be part of you embarking on this adventure. So let's talk about finding your best fit college. We'll talk about, first of all, what does best fit mean? You hear that term best fit sort of thrown around, and no one really exactly defines it. They just say, is it a good fit? We'll define fit. We'll talk about college lists and rankings, and then we'll talk about components of fit: practical components, social and cultural components, financial and academic components that will all come together to create a best fit school. So first of all, we're going to recap. Last week we did a presentation on driving criteria, which was part one of this series, how to determine where to apply to college. You can go back and review those slides. There is some overlap between the past presentation and this evening's. However, you can get more detail by reviewing the past presentation slides. What we want to do is, first of all, you have to start the college conversation as early as possible with your family and friends, anyone who's involved in the school selection process, in your college process. You want to have an open dialogue on an ongoing basis because this is an evolutionary process. And the more people who are involved in the process in terms of financially involved, emotionally involved, parentally involved, everyone needs to be part of this conversation. And one of the things that we are recapping is we talked about defining your preferred driving criteria to hone over time and through research. We talked about location. We talked about college setting, college size, major selection, campus culture, campus life, which is different than culture, educational opportunities, campus involvement, and finances. Those were all in our last presentation. So tonight will be different, the next phase of the process. So what does best fit mean? This really differs from student to student and family to family, and it really evolves through the college research process. You may think, oh my gosh, I want to go to, let's use one of my schools. I want to go to Cornell University. It's the best school ever. It's my dream school. Well, you may have that in concept, but you don't really know. You may just have the idea and this dream. But until you dig in and do college research, you don't really know. You may find out that Cornell is in Ithaca, New York, and is way too cold for you and is not a good fit. So let's consider multiple types of fit, not just one factor. So don't limit your list, for example, to the Ivies or to one geographic location. I've worked with many students who start our conversation with, I want to go to an Ivy League university. Well, the Ivy League universities are, first of all, there are many more schools beyond the Ivies. And the Ivies, saying I want to go to an Ivy is like saying, they're so widely varied. Columbia University, smack in the middle of New York City, as compared to Dartmouth University, which is rural. So saying you want to go to an Ivy may not mean that one of the Ivies is a best fit. And there are so many other schools to look at beyond the Ivies. Also, in terms of geographic location, sometimes families hone in and say, you need to stay close to home, or I only want to go east, or I only want to go west. Again, as you explore through this college process, your best fit may be a school that is in a location that you never considered. And something else to realize is that while a school may seem right on paper, sometimes as you go through this process, you get a gut feeling. And sometimes the gut feeling happens in the research process. Sometimes it happens when you're in a virtual info session or if you have a campus visit. But sometimes you just know that a school is right. And other times you know that a school is not right. So that there is an intangible component of best fit that comes up that's just sort of a physical feeling that you get. We really want to make sure that you challenge yourself to consider stretch schools that are outside of your preferences or perceived fit and really open your mind. This is a time where you have the time and the energy to take a lot of effort, to make a lot of effort doing research in many, many ways. And don't limit yourself, because this is the beginning of the process, not the end of the process. So this is where the world should be your oyster. And you can look at schools all over the country, all types of schools, all shapes, all sizes, and figure out what best fit means for you. So let's talk about college lists and rankings. This is something that students frequently use in determining fit. So the good thing about lists and rankings is there are many, many lists and rankings available. So when we say rankings, what are the top schools for pre-med? What are the top engineering schools? What are the top schools for comp sci? What are the top schools undergraduate? We're talking about undergraduate schools. What are the top undergraduate schools for business majors? There are lists galore. The US News and World Report is one that is very well known. Niche.com is another one that's very well known. The Princeton Review has some lists. You can Google top 100 computer science undergraduate programs and a list or 10 will pop up. So you have a lot of lists. You'll see that there's a lot of overlap between the list, which is frequently a good thing because it means that there's some consistency in how schools are ranked. So you want to target specific lists that focus on a certain aspect of what you're looking for in a school. Typically, that's going to start with major. So typically, you're going to start with a list that focuses on your major. But there are also lists of schools that are financial aid generous, merit aid generous, geographically diverse. There are lists that pull out every single criteria you can imagine and rank schools based on that. So it's a great place to start looking for well-respected programs in specific areas of study or in a specific region of the country. But again, we say it's a start because these lists are created by teams of experts through exhaustive research, but they are not exhaustive lists. And just because a school is number one on a list does not mean it's going to be the school for you. So let's continue a little more info on list. The bad component of list. And when I say bad, they're not bad, but it's the less positive components. They're not exhaustive and not all lists are created equal. They tend to focus typically on well-known schools, particularly if you're looking for the top school in computer science or the top schools in pre-med. Of course, they're going to focus on well-known schools because they tend to be more applied to, better known, and more popular. Everyone else challenges that you and every other student who's applying for college and looking at colleges right now, or the same time you are, is looking at those same lists, which means that the schools that show up on them are typically the most selective schools to be admitted to. There's more competition for schools that are on these ranked lists. And it's because everyone's using the same list and everyone's applying to the same schools. You can break that mold and get off of the list or go deeper into it rather than saying top 10, go into top 50 and expand, broaden your horizons. So as I say in the next point, don't limit yourself to the top 20 or the top 50. Maybe the top 100. You're going to find schools that are interesting that you've never heard of. Whereas if you say the top 10, you will have heard of every one of those schools. Each school is different and can't be compared as an apple to apple comparison because there are so many different factors in list compiling and what goes into them. As I mentioned, the US News and World Report and many other lists actually give you their methodology as to how they create their list, which really helps. Something to be aware of that you may notice when you pull up college rankings is sometimes there'll be a variety of schools, and then there'll be one that says sponsored, and there's a random school in the middle of your list. Sponsored means that that school has paid to be placed on the list, and it's not necessarily relevant to your search. So just be aware that sponsored schools are schools that have paid for that placement and may not actually be placed. If they fall fifth in the list, it may just be because they paid to fall fifth in the list. So something to really be aware of is sponsored schools. Let's talk about fit: practical, social, cultural, financial, and academic. So practical fit. Many components go into practical fit. Student services, for example. Does the school provide specialty support advisors? If you're a student with special needs, does the school provide accommodations for you? Do they have advisors who work with you one-on-one and make sure that you're keeping pace and that you're getting the help that you need? Do you need to provide documentation for accommodations? Again, if you're a student with disabilities or special needs and need help in college, whether it be extra time, note-taking, what type of accommodations are available? These are a few examples. Sometimes double time, sometimes note-taking in classes, which means that you get copies of notes that someone else in your class has taken. So something to look into. If you need accommodations, what type of accommodations are available? That is always shown on the school's website. Some of them are broad and deep, and others just do the basic. Schools are required legally to offer accommodations to students with disabilities, but the degree of which they offer can vary quite drastically. So let's talk about another important component: mental health services on campus. Does the school provide mental health service? I would say 99% of colleges provide some form of mental health services on campus. And if so, what kind? Does it mean that you can go see a psychologist, a psychiatrist? Who can you see if you need someone to talk to, if you're totally stressed out and you really feel like you need a sounding board and you need some sort of stress release? What about writing and tutoring centers? When I was at Harvard, there was a writing center where before I handed a paper in, I could take it in and have a graduate student or a postdoc student go over my paper and critique it with me. And most schools have this opportunity where you can have someone, typically an upperclassman or graduate student, help you with your paper, and it's free of charge. It's something to look into and see. Most schools have these writing or tutoring centers on campus. Medical services. Is there a hospital nearby? Is there a student medical center in case you get sick, if you have the flu, if you have to go in to see a doctor quickly? Do you have easy access to medical services? Health insurance. Some schools require students to purchase health insurance, whether they have it independently or not, which most of you will have health insurance through your family. Something to look into that's in the fine print. There are times when you can have that waived as long as you prove that you have insurance, but it varies from school to school. So these are all practical things to look at when you're looking at a school. Let's talk about libraries. What are the library hours on campus? I can tell you again, when I was in grad school, there was not a 24-hour library, and it made me crazy because I didn't want to fold my books up at 11 o'clock and go home and have to continue studying at home. I wanted to stay at the library and work, but there was not a 24-hour library. So what are the library hours on campus? How many are there? If the library closes earlier, where can you study late at night? Do libraries have breakout session rooms, which are rooms that are typically on the perimeter of the library that allow students who are in study groups or working on group projects get together in these rooms? They typically have whiteboards and they're soundproof, so you can work in them as a group and not disturb the rest of the library. How many libraries are on campus, and do they have book exchange programs with other universities? That means that if you go to a school, so say you're at MIT and you want a book that's not in their library, however, Harvard has it. MIT and Harvard have a reciprocal relationship with their libraries. So you put in a request, MIT sends a note to Harvard, Harvard then shoots the book over to MIT and you get it. So you don't have to go to Harvard to get the book, you get it at MIT. So that's something to look into. Many schools have consortiums of groups of libraries that all work together, and you can take books out from one or the other wherever you are. How accessible is the librarian? The librarian is a key component of your college experience, because you're going to be doing research papers, and there's no one better to help you learn how to do research in the library than the librarian. Is there one librarian? Are there 5 librarians? What are their hours? Do you have to make appointments? Something to think about when you're, again, looking at practical fit. These seem like minute details, but they all add up to really help you decide if a school has a practical fit. Course textbooks, are they on reserve? Many students choose not to buy textbooks because maybe they're too expensive, and they figure they can go to the library and take them out on reserve and do the reading in the library. So something else to think of in practical fit. A little more info on practical fit. Housing. Is housing required or guaranteed for first-year students? Is it required or guaranteed for all 4 years? Columbia University, for example, New York City, impossible to find affordable housing. Columbia guarantees students access to housing for all 4 years of their time at Columbia. So you don't have to, freshman year you have to live on campus. After that, you don't have to. However, it's much more affordable to be able to live in Columbia housing than to find an apartment in New York City. Which dorms are open to freshmen? Are there freshman dorms? Are there dorms that are for a variety of students? Where are they located? Are dorms based on major or general interest? Sometimes there are special, University of San Diego is an example, University of California at San Diego. They have 6 different dorms. They're called living and learning communities. And students who have similar interests live in those communities. And it doesn't mean they all have the same major, but they meet together in their dorms. They have study sessions, they have different group sessions, they have activities with students who have similar, they're sort of like affinity groups. They have similar goals and similar interests, and you can choose which type of dorm you want to live in. Is there convenient and affordable housing near campus? So say you decide after freshman year you want to move off of campus. Does that mean you can go right on the periphery of campus and there are a lot of apartments or condos or homes that you can share with other students? Or is that not available and do you have to go further out and commute into school? Or how affordable is the housing near school? So something to look at, again, in practical fit. And I know for many of you, this seems like it's sort of light years away that you would even consider this, but these are all issues that you need to consider when you're evaluating schools for fit. Is there married student or family housing near campus? So some of you may be graduate students who are married and don't want to live in the dorms, obviously, and many schools have apartments available for married students with families or just married students, including childcare options that may be available on campus. Something else is, how do you pay for meals on or near campus? Many schools have, you have a meal card that you use at the dining halls on campus, and then frequently they have something called bonus bucks, and they're called different things at different schools. But it's an additional amount of funding that's on your meal plan that you can use frequently in little restaurants or cafes on the perimeter of campus. So they'll take the school's meal plan card and you can get a sandwich or maybe a Starbucks or something. So that's maybe how you pay for meals, or maybe they don't have that and you need to use cash or a debit card or a credit card to pay for meals near campus. Cars. Can freshmen bring cars to campus? I would say the majority of colleges do not allow freshmen. The majority of four-year colleges do not allow freshmen to bring cars to campus. Community colleges are different because they tend to be commuter colleges. So freshmen need their cars because they're coming to and from home to school. Is permanent parking available? And if so, how much does it cost? Parking on campus can be very, very expensive because it's very limited. And of course, anytime things are limited, prices go up. So another thing to look at in practical fit for colleges. Let's talk about social and cultural fit. Clubs and organizations. So many of you are involved in clubs and organizations in high school. And if that's something that you enjoy, is it something you want to pursue in college? Ideally, yes. Is there a central listing of clubs and organizations on campus, on the school website? Can you look and see a comprehensive list? How easy is it to find, join, or if you want to start a club? Say you are very involved in a club in your high school and your college doesn't have it and you want to bring it to your college. How difficult or easy is it to start that club on your college campus? What percentage of students participate in Greek life? This is something that could be quite important because if you're not interested in Greek life, which means for fraternities and sororities, for those of you who are not familiar with the term Greek life, if it's a heavily Greek school, which means that the majority of students participate in fraternities and sororities, and it's not your thing, maybe it's not going to be a good fit. When I went to Cornell, it was a huge sorority and fraternity school, and it wasn't for me. I chose not to rush. I chose not to join a sorority, and I was absolutely fine. It was still a fine fit for me, but most of my friends were still members of sororities or fraternities. What activities are offered in the local community? So again, we're talking about right off of campus. Are there martial arts studios? Are there dance studios? Are there things that you can do off campus so that you can get a little break from being on campus all the time? And what type of athletic opportunities are available? There are intramural athletics, which means that anyone can participate. Club athletics, a little more competitive. Typically, you have to try out. Can you walk on? Can you potentially walk on to a Division 1, 2, or 3 sport? Division 1, not so likely, but you never know. So something to look into is what sports opportunities are there on campus if sports is important to you. If not, then that's not going to be an issue. Something else to consider in social and cultural fit is if there's a high level of satisfaction amongst the student body. And this is something that a website, for example, niche.com is a site that ranks schools A through D. I don't know if they go to F, on everything from access to professors to student satisfaction. Our book, 385, the Guide to 385 Colleges, which I'm messing up the name, but also includes information on student satisfaction. And there's another website called Unigo that gives student reviews. Student satisfaction is really important, and it's something worth researching, and frequently students overlook it. So the way you do that is you read reviews, you look at rankings, you look at grades that schools are given for student satisfaction. If a school has a D in student satisfaction, it's probably not a school for you. Is diversity a factor in your school choice? And what types of diversity are important to you? So let's talk about types of diversity. There's racial and ethnic diversity, socioeconomic diversity, gender diversity. Is it a heavily female or heavily male, or is it an all-female school? There's only one all-male school left in the country, but there are around 30 all-female schools. So are you okay with no gender diversity and going to a single-sex school? Geographic diversity is important, something that may be important to you, particularly, if you're an out-of-state student going to a state school in another state. There's not going to be as much geographic diversity because typically colleges cap the number of out-of-state students at a university at about 30%, which means that if you go to a state school in another state, 70% of your classmates are going to be from that state, which does not give you great geographic diversity. Another component of geographic diversity is to many students is there an international student population? And the way that you find this is you go on the school website, and they have all of this broken down on the website. They'll have racial and ethnic diversity, they'll have geographic diversity, they'll have socioeconomic diversity. It's all broken down, and you just have to dig into the website to find out. So let's talk about financial fit. And the first thing to do, which we mentioned in the very beginning of the presentation, is you have to start early with a family discussion about finances. Who is going to be paying for school? Is the student going to be applying for financial aid or taking out loans to pay for school? Are parents paying for school out of pocket? Our grandparents sometimes are involved in paying and helping to pay for school. So start with a family discussion about finances. What can you afford? Can you afford only an in-state school? Can you afford a private school? Things to look at, and it's hugely important, because the last thing on earth you want to happen is for you to fall in love with a school and find out that you can't afford to go there. So the cost of attendance is something you need to take into account when looking at financial fit. What the cost of attendance includes is tuition, room, board, books, fees, sometimes travel. And it's published on the school website. It does not include, however, a lot of other costs. It doesn't include the cost of outfitting your dorm room. It doesn't include your toiletries, your laundry detergent, your cell phone, all the things, the little things that you have at home that you share with your family that suddenly you have to have on your own at college, that add up. And they can add up to, as much as $8,000. Consider maybe if you live in the West and you go to school in the East, you're suddenly going to have to buy warmer clothes to go to a colder climate, something that's not going to be factored in to the published cost of attendance, but you need to think about, because it's going to be a cost that your family will incur. So net price calculators are your friend. And what a net price calculator is, every college is required to have it on their website. Go on the site and search net price calculator. And you can input information, and it gives you a sense as to what your net price will be, as to what you will actually pay, whether you'll qualify for any sort of aid or not. And the school does not keep any records of these net price calculators. They're just something that you input the information and they give you a number. So definitely use these to get some sense of financial fit and what the cost of attendance will actually be. In-state versus out-of-state tuition. So which option is less expensive? In-state tuition for a public university is typically going to be less expensive than out-of-state tuition at a public university or at a private university. The cost of attendance, the published cost of attendance. However, what you may not be taking into account, particularly when you compare publics and privates, is private schools tend to be more generous with financial aid, with grant aid. That means you don't have to pay it back. Whereas public universities for financial aid tend to give you loans, which you have to pay back. So something to think about, that private schools are not always pricier if they give you grant aid. It can bring the net cost way down to students who apply for financial aid. So talking about scholarships and grant opportunities. Does the school offer merit aid or only need-based aid? So merit aid is basically a school saying, you are a high-achieving student. We really want you at our university. We're going to discount our tuition by $10,000 a year and call that merit aid. So you get a merit aid award of $10,000. You do not apply for merit aid. It's just a wonderful surprise that you get in your college acceptance letter. It's rare for higher end private universities to offer merit aid. Typically, you'll find merit aid at large public schools because they want to attract high achieving students who may otherwise shy away from the school. But once they see they're getting a good merit aid package, they'll think twice about it. Do they only offer need-based financial aid? And that's something that you apply for and is based on your family's financial situation. Does the school meet 100% of a student's demonstrated need? This is something, again, that's listed on the website. Go on the financial aid page on the school's website and look at all the details about financial aid. You can also Google a list of colleges that meet 100% of students' demonstrated need. And when you say demonstrated need, it means after you fill out the financial aid forms, the need that you come up, that basically the forms spit out a number saying this is what you need to go to this school. This is the help you need from us. If students have to take out loans, what is the average loan debt that students graduate with? This is something that's really important to think about, because do you want to graduate $100,000 in debt? It's something to think about if you're comparing schools that are offering you loans versus grants, or in-state versus out-of-state. Loan debt and graduating with loan debt is something that's really important to think about. And typically, the students will take out the loan. Who's paying it back is, varies within the family, but ultimately the student is responsible for paying back the loan, even if the parent is putting the money back into the payoff. Academic fit. So areas of interest and major. What specialty programs are available with your major of interest? So for example, if you want to go into business, maybe they have a marketing major within business. There's accounting, maybe there's entrepreneurship. Rather than just business administration, which is sort of the umbrella major in business, do they have specialty majors broken out within that? You want to do this by researching the majors on the school's website. The other thing you want to do that's really important is research the curriculum and see if you'll be able to keep up with the rigor of courses. If you're going to be an engineer, for example, look at the required courses. You may have to take thermodynamics. You may have to take, you will have to take extremely advanced math classes. Can you take those classes and keep up? Is that your area of expertise? If not, you really need to look at the required courses and say, is this major for me? And all of the curriculum is going to be on the school's website. The website is your friend. You also want to look at what are the general education requirements, core requirements, and elective options. Again, all on the website. How competitive is your major at school? So when you see a school's overall acceptance rate, it doesn't break it down by major. Some schools may give you the acceptance rate within a major. That tends to be rare, but is that major, for example, computer science, very hot right now, going to be very competitive at most schools. However, if it's in the School of Engineering, say you want to take computer science in the School of Arts and Sciences, if it offers it, it's going to be less competitive, a slightly different program, but you want to know what your options are and how competitive your major is, because when you declare your major on your application, that's going to have some impact as to whether you get in or not. How many students are enrolled in the major? Is it a huge major? If so, it's sort of the good news and the bad news, because it means they admit a lot of students into that major, and they probably have a really broad and deep curriculum. But it could also mean that it's extremely popular and maybe more competitive. Does the major require a capstone project or thesis? And this varies from school to school and from major to major. Not all majors require a thesis for graduation. And we're talking about an undergraduate thesis, not a graduate thesis. Class size. What is the range of class sizes on campus? What is the average class size in your major of interest? It can vary drastically. If you're in a smaller major, your classes are probably going to be smaller. If you're in a huge major with a lot of students, you'll probably have larger class sizes. And schools will publish the student to teacher ratio, which gives you a class size. 15:1 or lower is a really great student to teacher ratio. As soon as you get higher, you can get a little lost in the weeds with student to teacher ratio. Do larger classes. So say you have one big, massive session of 200 or 300 students. does that big class then offer breakout sessions with seminars or TA sessions where you then break into smaller groups? So you learn the mass of the base of the course in a large environment, but then maybe twice a week you meet with smaller groups to help further your understanding of the content. Other academic fit issues: advising and course registration. Your advisor in college is your friend, and you want to see how your advisor is assigned to you. Is it based on your major? Is it random? Is it alphabetical? Ideally, it's based on your major, because that means that your advisor will know what you need to take and what you need to do within your major. But that doesn't happen at all schools. How often do you meet with your advisor? And I have to say, I suggest you meet with your advisor once a week. Even if you don't have anything in particular to talk about, this is a person you want to get to know, because they're your advocate. If you're having a hard time getting into a class, they're going to help you. Ideally, they're going to help you. Can they help you troubleshoot during course registration, which can be really challenging? Can your advisor help you get into a course that's full or has a wait list? Can you cross-register for classes at nearby schools? So this is something, again, when I mentioned the consortium of schools with libraries, many schools allow you to cross-register and take classes at other schools or within other majors, even though you're attending a specific school in a specific major. So those are other academic fit issues. Let's talk about academic and research opportunities. Is there a first-year experience or similar program available to freshmen? The first-year experience, which is called FYE, it basically is a program that is an orientation program for freshmen all year long for their freshman year. It takes place as a class. Students meet in smaller seminar-like classes, and they talk about everything to do with school. It's not an academic class. It is something that helps them get adjusted to their first year in school. And it greatly increases student retention, which means students who come back their second year. It's been proven that schools with first year experience programs have much better retention than schools that do not. And again, this is something you'll find on the website. A similar program to an FYE is Harvard, for example, has freshman seminars. All freshmen need to take a freshman seminar. And you're in class only with freshmen. They're small classes. You get to know each other. You get to know your professor. And they're only available to freshmen. So you don't have that intense competition with upperclassmen to get a class. How much access do you have to professors? Does your professor have office hours that you can sign up for? Can you see your professor once a week if you need help? Can you see your professor more than once a week if you need help? Or is everything done by your teaching assistant or your graduate assistant? What undergraduate research, internship, or fellowship programs are available? That's something, again, that you'll find on the school's website. And you want to see, University of Michigan, for example, has something called UROP, which is Undergraduate Research Opportunity Program. They have a huge focus on undergraduate research, and many students want to do research and may have a hard time as an undergrad because research is typically done by graduate students. So if you're interested in research, you want to make sure that in your academic fit search for a school, that school gives undergraduates opportunities for research and does not just limit it to graduate students. Collaborative versus competitive environment. So a collaborative, I touched on this in our last presentation. A collaborative environment is where students tend to work in groups. Classes are not graded on curves, and it's not sort of backstabbing, one trying to get over the other to get a better grade. Whereas a competitive environment is, some schools still grade on curves, and that means if I do better than you, we're going to impact each other on the curve, and we're all competing against each other to get a higher grade on that curve. Something that I want to really clarify is just because a school is collaborative does not mean that it's not highly academic. some students think, oh, if a school's collaborative, it's going to be easy. That is not the case at all. It's just a different type of learning and teaching. So collaborative environments can be intensely academic and intensely rigorous. It's just a different style of learning and of teaching. So college list categorization, what does it mean and how do you categorize a school? So you may have heard the term REACH. A REACH school is probably less than 20%, a 20% chance of admission. Highly selective schools, acceptance rates under 15 to 20% are almost always a REACH for any student, because it comes down to really fine-tuning admissions, fine-tuning their evaluation of students. When you get to schools that are that selective, you are competing against the cream of the crop for spaces. A target school, a 50-50 shot of acceptance. Your academic, your extracurricular profile, your testing fit right in line with the average admitted student. So it's sort of that sweet spot for you that's a target school that you can look into and say, okay, I'm not guaranteed admission here. It's not a REACH, it's not a likely, but it looks like I'm really qualified for this school. And then we have what we call a likely school. There are no longer safety schools because you never know. A likely school, you tend to have higher, your academic and extracurricular profile fit are above the average admitted student. Merit scholarships are more likely at likely schools. I'm sorry for the repetition. And the odds of you getting in are quite high. However, never take a likely school for granted, and make sure when you're building your college list that you have a cross section of all of these schools. You don't want to have all REACH schools, because by definition, your odds of getting in are much slimmer than in a target or a likely. So you want to balance your list categorization. And we'll go into that in our next presentation, where we'll go into college research. So that is this evening's presentation, and we are open for questions, and Emily will share questions that you've all put out, and hopefully I can answer them.
Thank you, Julia. Thank you so much for presenting this afternoon. We have not had any questions come in so far. I'm not sure if that means that everything was very clear, or if we're just waiting. Maybe we have a bunch that's kind of been waiting to ask their questions throughout. So I will give you guys a couple minutes. If you want to submit some questions through the chat box, we'd be happy to answer them for those of you that are still with us this evening. Julia, do you want to go to the next slide and we can just kind of touch on what we offer?
Absolutely.
Questions. Thank you. For those of you that joined us this evening or that are watching later on, if you feel like this was a good start to answering questions and you'd like to work with a counselor like Julia, a little bit more one-on-one, we do have some college counseling programs available. So we'll just leave it at that. If you're interested, give us a ring or schedule a free consultation with us online. We'd love to work with you guys, but we are here to answer questions for those of you that are around right now. So please feel free to share them. Oh, and we are having a part 3 of this series. Thank you, Julia, for moving to the final slide. So if you want to join us the Thursday after Thanksgiving, I don't have that date off the top of my head right now. It's the first week of December. At the same time, we will be doing part 3 of this series, researching colleges and demonstrating interest in a COVID world. So we'll run through kind of like, now that we've told you how to outline your criteria, assess for fit, now how do you actually find this information out about schools? Where do you look? What are some good resources to dig into? And the importance of demonstrating interest to schools, and how do you do that when you can't actually visit them right now? So if you'd like to learn more about that, definitely join us for the 3rd installment of this series. And we have yet to get any questions in. So
Okay. Well,
maybe this was a good recap of last week's material.
hopefully it was. We provided a lot of information, and know that if you have a question after the fact, you can always put, I believe you can put questions in the YouTube chat, and we may be able to answer them. But thank you everyone for joining us and for taking the time out of your busy days to learn about College Fit. We really appreciate your being here. And thank you.
I think we just sent a call out for last question, so let's stick around just for one more minute or so, just to see if anybody brings anything in. But I'll just give you guys a couple more seconds to see if anybody has any questions. Give Julia a break. I know she's been talking nonstop for 45 minutes.
Water, sorry.
Awesome. Well, I'm not seeing anything come in, so I'm going to assume that everybody's good, and we will see you guys again 2 weeks from now. We look forward to it.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Emily.
All right. Thanks, guys. Thank you so much for presenting this evening, Julia.
My pleasure. Good night.